Have you ever judged someone before you really knew them? Maybe it was a neighbor who never smiled back, or someone who mumbled a little too loudly at the grocery store. Always wore this faded green army jacket, even in July, had the same pair of boots, too muddy and worn. His yard, a mess. One morning, a delivery truck had backed into a tree on our street. No one was hurt, but the tree had partially fallen, and it blocked the road completely. I came out to look, and there was Mr. Coleman already out there in his boots, tugging on a rope, trying to help the driver clear the road. You can spend years avoiding them, thinking you've got them all figured out, and then one small moment can open a door you didn't even know was there. He quietly shoveled snow from her walkway in winter. He once spent an entire afternoon fixing an old tricycle left near the curb, cleaned it up, greased the wheels, left it on the porch of the young couple with twins. No note, no knocking, and not just watching or barking orders. He was sweating, pulling hard, working like he was half his age. The grass was always a little too high. Tools were left lying around. A few times we exchanged words, nothing deep, just weather or how late the mail was. But I started to look forward to those moments more than I expected. The mail piled up before it ever made it inside. Not just for him, but for the time I had wasted. The years I could have known him. The conversations that never happened. Sometimes it wears old boots and doesn't make eye contact. Sometimes it shovels your sidewalk without asking. And sometimes it's gone before you ever got the chance to say thank you. The simple, human connection I had been too proud or too afraid to make. It reminds me to pause, to look again, to give people more than just a glance. Because you never really know what someone is carrying or what they might be quietly offering until you stop long enough to see. And he never waved, not once. I'd nod politely if we crossed paths, and he'd just glance at the ground, like I wasn't even there. I stood there, helpless, heart sinking, as the door closed. I nodded, and she handed me the box. He wanted you to have this. Said you helped with the tree. I didn't see him for weeks after that, so after a while, I stopped trying. I'd turn the other way when I saw him on the sidewalk. I even stopped walking my dog past his house. It's funny, isn't it? How quickly we can decide what someone's likes just from the way they walk, or what kind of dog they have, or how their yard looks. I thought I was protecting myself from what I wasn't quite sure. How many people do we pass by every day who have something to teach us, something to share, a story we'll never hear because we've already made up our mind? I just assumed he didn't want to talk. Maybe he was mean. Maybe he had a bad temper. Maybe he just didn't like people. And a small photograph of a younger Mr. Coleman, in uniform, standing with two friends in front of a tank. On the back, in shaky handwriting, he had written, "We didn't always talk, but we had each other's backs." That was enough. And so, for years, I avoided him. Quietly, but deliberately. I used to do that, more than I care to admit. But there's one person I judged so completely wrong. It still stays with me, even now, and his name was Mr. Coleman. Just one word: rope. He lived 2 houses down from me. You couldn't miss him. I nodded, stepped in, and helped him tie off the branches. We didn't say much, but I'll tell you what, I started to see him a little differently that day. Now, to be honest, I thought I was doing the right thing. It wasn't until something unexpected happened that things began to shift. He looked up, caught me watching from the sidewalk, and for the first time in years, he said something to me. It wasn't a question really, more like an offer. That's the strange thing about people. After that morning, I found myself noticing more. He always brought his garbage bins back in for the lady next door. I started wondering what else I'd missed. Who was this man, really? And why had I been so quick to write him off? It was around this time that I began waving again when I passed his house, and he started to nod back. Then one afternoon, I saw the ambulance. It was parked right in front of his house. No lights, no sign, just 2 paramedics loading someone gently into the back. One morning, his niece came by. She was carrying a small cardboard box. She walked up to me and said, "You live nearby, right?" I didn't even know he remembered that. Inside the box were a few things. A letter. I stood in my kitchen that night, holding that photo, and I cried. And it got me thinking. Mr. Coleman taught me that sometimes kindness isn't loud. I still keep that photo by my desk. It reminds me to pause, to look again, to give people more than just a glance. Because you never really know what someone is carrying or what they might be quietly offering until you stop long enough to see. After that day, I began looking at people differently. Not just Mr. Coleman, but everyone. The man who grumbles to himself while waiting at the pharmacy. What if they've lived through things I can't even imagine? Lost people they don't talk about. Fought battles no one ever thanked them for. Or maybe they're just waiting, hoping for someone to say hello first. The woman who always sits alone at church. The quiet faces at the community center who never raise their hands, but always listen. I started asking myself, what if they're just like Mr. Coleman? And that made me think about all the small, missed chances in life. The tiny windows that open just for a moment and then close. I wonder what he might have said if I had walked over. Maybe nothing important, or maybe everything. We all assume we'll have another opportunity, that there'll be more time, that next week, or sometime soon will eventually arrive. But it doesn't always, does it? And if we're not paying attention, it slips right past us. He had lost his younger brother in that same war, raised his niece after her parents passed. He didn't write much, just a few paragraphs, scribbled in pencil, but it was more than enough. But I never minded. People are scared of what they don't understand. I was, too, when I was your age. Spent years working a job he never loved, so he could keep the family house. There was one particular moment I remember so clearly. It was a Thursday morning, not just with neighbors, but with old friends, with my family, even with myself. You just have to look long enough. I had taken the trash out and was halfway back to the house when I saw Mr. Coleman. This was weeks before the ambulance, sitting on his porch with a mug of coffee. It doesn't need to be eloquent. It just needs to be real. For the silence you kept, for the assumptions you made. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept, but he gave me a little nod. And for what? Wearing old clothes. Not smiling enough. Having a messy yard. I saw him, an older, scruffy beard, thick glasses, struggling to reach a jar on the top shelf. For a moment, I hesitated, but then I thought of Mr. Coleman and stepped forward. And sometimes, just to myself, it helps me stay open, or call, or wave again. It helps me remember that every connection, no matter how brief, is value. It matters now more than ever, especially for us, those of us in the later chapters of life. We have the gift of hindsight, of patience, of seeing what really counts. Looking back now, I realize those were just the surface. They said nothing about the man inside. Maybe ask if he needed anything. Just talk. But I didn't. We think no one wants to hear this, or they wouldn't understand. I told myself, he probably wants to be left alone. And I went back inside. People rush more, talk less. Everyone seems distracted, heads down, always scrolling, always somewhere else. And I paused. I actually stopped walking. Conversations we never had, apologies we meant to say, people we kept at arm's length for too long. It doesn't make us bad, it just makes us human. Part of me wanted to turn back and go over. I've replayed that moment so many times in my head. That's the thing about connection, it doesn't always announce itself. It comes quietly, in small moments. I think many of us, especially as we get older, we carry regrets like that. But it's never too late to soften, to reach out, to see people more clearly. I think about how easy it was for me to judge Mr. Coleman. He had been in the military, served in a war I'd only read about. I learned all of this through the letter he left me. He wrote, "You're not the first to avoid me." And this line, it stays with me. He wrote, "There's still time to see people for who they really are." That sentence became a kind of turning point for me, because sometimes the hardest person to forgive is you, for the time you wasted. But here's what I've learned. Connection doesn't need to be perfect. I remember a few weeks after Mr. Coleman passed, I was in the supermarket. I helped him reach it. We exchanged a few words, nothing deep, but there was warmth there, a smile, a tiny bit of trust, and that's where it starts. One small moment at a time. You know, the world feels lonelier than it used to, but connection still matters. And yet, we often keep our stories locked up, our feelings hidden. But maybe they would. Maybe they need to. I've started writing more letters now. Real, handwritten letters. Sometimes to people I've lost touch with. Sometimes to people right next door. And so, I say this to you, from one neighbor to another. If there's someone you've avoided, or misunderstood, or quietly judged, maybe today's the day to knock on their door. It doesn't have to be perfect, just real. We don't always get second chances, but sometimes the smallest act can become one. Some days I still walk past Mr. Coleman's house. It's different now. The windows are cleaner. The lawn is tidy. His niece moved in with her little boy after he passed, and you can hear laughter coming from the porch sometimes. Thank him for showing me that sometimes. The people we avoid are the ones we need to understand the most. That kindness doesn't always wear a smile, and that presence, just quiet, consistent presence, can mean more than words. We had one of those falling outs over something small. Who said what at a wedding? Who didn't send a card? And then time just stretched out between us like a long, cold winter. I thought about that letter Mr. Coleman wrote me, about how we all have time to see people differently if we just choose to. So I picked up the phone. It frees up room for something better. Just small things: setting up chairs, serving coffee, helping with crafts. At first, I felt a little out of place, but there's a man there named Harold. He doesn't talk much either, just kind of nods, keeps to himself. Reminds me of someone, but that doesn't make them any less real. But there's still that same old porch swing, still that same cracked front step. We tell ourselves we'll reach out tomorrow, that we'll apologize next week, that the right moment will come. And once in a while, I swear I can still picture him sitting there with his coffee, just watching the neighborhood wake up. I never stopped to ask why he might seem that way. I never gave him the chance to be anything else, until it was almost too late. I wish I could talk to him now, tell him what he taught me. He taught me more in a handful of brief interactions than many people do in years of conversation. But what Mr. Coleman taught me is that connection doesn't always look like that. Sometimes it's in the things we don't say. Look again at the people you've stopped noticing, the ones you've passed in silence, the ones who seem closed off or distant. They might be the very people who will teach you something beautiful if you let them. The silent wave, the quick glance, the gesture no one asked for teaching me to look twice, for reminding me that quiet people still have loud stories, and for showing me that it's never too late to become a better neighbor, a better friend, and a better human. Maybe now's the time to reach out, to be softer and braver, and just a little more willing to see the good in people. Sometimes a simple, "Hey, I was thinking about you," is all it takes to open a door again. That we all want to be seen, even if we're not sure how to show it. And that it costs us nothing at all to see someone with a little more softness. I never got to say those things, but I've started saying them to others. It's the small ones, the unexpected kindness, the wave you didn't expect, the neighbor who quietly repaired your fence, the man who handed you a rope and said nothing else. I finally called my cousin after almost a decade. The first few seconds were awkward. I almost hung up, but then she answered, and she cried, and so did I. We didn't rehash the past, we just started from where we were, and now we talk every week. That's the beautiful thing about letting go of old judgments. I also started volunteering once a week at the local senior center, so I sit with him, not to make him talk, but just so he knows someone is there. I think Mr. Coleman would like that. You see, for most of my life, I thought relationships had to be big, dramatic things full of conversation and laughter and shared interests. We don't always get grand cinematic endings. Sometimes, the most meaningful relationships in our lives are quiet, incomplete, a little messy. There's something else I've been thinking about a lot lately. How often we delay kindness. But the truth is, the right moment is usually the one right in front of you. I used to think of Mr. Coleman as the grumpy man down the street. And yet, even with the short time we had, he made an impression. He reminded me that we're all carrying something. So here's what I'd say to you, my friend. As we come to the end of this story, look around. And if there's someone you've avoided maybe for years because of a misunderstanding, or a personality clash, or even just a bad first impression, you don't have to write a long letter. You don't need the perfect words. Because the truth is, it's not the big things that stay with us. Those are the moments that last. Those are the ones we remember. And if we're lucky, if we're open, those moments can change us. So thank you, Mr. Coleman. And to you, watching right now, I hope you find the courage to reconnect. We only get so many days in this life. Let's not spend them avoiding one another. There's one more thing I've come to believe, especially as I get older. The way we remember people is often shaped by the small things they did, not the big speeches or grand gestures. Mr. Coleman never invited me in for coffee. We never sat down and had long conversations about life. And yet, the memory of him lingers stronger than some people I've known for years. To know that the life we lived made some kind of impact even if we weren't the loudest in the room. Why? Because he showed up in quiet ways, in moments that mattered, even when they seemed small. We assume the door is closed on new friendships, or second chances, or heartfelt change, but it hasn't. The truth is, we are never too old to grow a little softer, to open up a little more, to reach out with a little more kindness. their fears, their love, their history, their hopes. You'll never see those things if you only judge by first impressions. And isn't that what we all really want? To be remembered with warmth, to be understood, even if just a little. He looked up at me, smiled wide, and said, "You knew Uncle Donnie, right?" His life taught me to look at people not as they appear on the outside, but as they are on the inside, where all the real stuff lives. Don't let the years slip by in silence. I think sometimes, especially as we reach our 60s, 70s, 80s, we are never too old to forgive, and we are never too old to be forgiven. That our lives, yours and mine, are stitched together by moments of connection. Some loud, most quiet, some expected, most surprising, but all of them meaningful, if we're present enough to notice. Not if your heart still aches a little when you think about them. Not if their memory still brings up something tender in you. A few weeks ago, I was walking past that porch again, the one where Mr. Coleman used to sit and his niece's little boy was playing with a toy truck in the yard. I stopped. I didn't know anyone ever called him Donnie. A reminder that we all have more to give, more to forgive, and more to discover even in the people we thought we knew, or someone who might deserve a first one. Reach out. Be brave enough to go first, I said. I didn't know him well enough, but I wish I had. We don't always see the full impact, but it's there. Whether it's a quiet kindness, a second wave, a letter tucked into a cardboard box, it matters. It lasts. And thank you for being the kind of person who's still open to learning, still open to changing, and still open to loving no matter what age you are. Or maybe just share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you'd like more conversations like this, quiet, honest ones about life, memory, forgiveness, and hope, then feel free to subscribe. The boy nodded, like he understood more than I expected, and went back to his truck. That's when I realized something. Even brief connections ripple forward, but in the end, we all want the same thing: to be seen, to be known, and to be remembered for the quiet good we tried to do. And maybe that's the most important thing I've learned. So, if you've been thinking of someone, an old neighbor, an estranged family member, a friend you lost touch with, don't wait. Send the message, pick up the phone, walk across the street, because sometimes the most profound relationships begin with a single word, or a shared glance, or helping someone pull a tree off the road. You don't have to fix everything, you just have to show up. And if you feel like it's too late, let me remind you, it isn't. Not if you're still breathing. That means there's still a thread, and threads can be tied again, no matter how frayed. This story may have begun with a neighbor I avoided, but it ends with something deeper. So here is my gentle ask to you. Take a moment today and think about someone who might need a second chance. Because connection isn't about getting it right. It's about being willing. And you, my friend, you still have so much to offer. Thank you for listening. Thank you for reflecting with me. If this story meant something to you, I hope you'll share your own in the comments. We're all just neighbors, really. Some of us wave. Some of us forget too. Take care. Be kind, and I'll see you next time.